AMD had an investor conference yesterday on February 20th, and the semiconductor AI stock had much to share about its MI300X, its AI chip, and the overall AI market. While this was an AMD event, NVIDIA stock investors might also want to see the warning that AMD gave to NVIDIA. Also, if you are watching this on Wednesday, I will be live streaming NVIDIA's earnings in the next few hours, so make sure to stay tuned. And welcome. For those not familiar, my name's Jose Najarro, and I spend way too much time reading about semiconductors and AI. But thanks to that, my education and work experience, I believe I have created the #1 semiconductor podcast for investors. So let's get started with today's episode.
I want to thank The Motley Fool for sponsoring this video, and check out fool.com/Jose for the 10 best stocks to buy now. With that link, you get a promotional offer for the subscription service. Now, let's continue with today's episode.
All right, so if we take a closer look at AMD's stock price right now, a few hours before NVIDIA's earnings, the stock is down roughly 1.3%. We definitely see a nice red day all around, especially here in the tech market. Intel is down roughly 2.7% today during their Foundry event, which I will be doing a video either later today or tomorrow. And then we have NVIDIA down roughly 3.4% as we expect earnings after hours today. So with AMD, for those that were not familiar, on February 20th, it did have an investor event. And like I mentioned, they talk a lot about the overall AI space. And the event actually took place with Mark Papermaster, who is the CTO and Executive Vice President, Technology and Engineering of AMD. So obviously, as the CTO, you have a lot of great insight about all the kind of advancements in not just AMD in general, but with the technology space as well. So the first question that was asked on Mark was about this $400 billion market size that AMD kind of gave us in their December 6th event, where they expect the AI market to grow to $400 billion by 2027. And the analyst was more curious of, hey, what is driving this huge growth and what portion is AMD going to take? And Mark Papermaster pretty much mentioned that, hey, look, since we gave those numbers of $400 billion, we've kind of received evidence that these numbers are not as crazy as many people think. We've seen from major hyperscalers that they have increased their overall capex and increased growth year over year to kind of continue to build out these AI infrastructures. And if you have been watching this channel here, we've taken a closer look at all the big tech investments, and they have mentioned that yes, they are going to increase capital expenditure to continue to focus on AI solutions. Outside of that, you've also had Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, come out and call for trillions of dollars of investments to build up the necessary AI infrastructure. So obviously, this kind of showcases that, hey, $400 billion total addressable market by 2027 is not as crazy if OpenAI CEO is talking about trillions of dollars. It makes it seem a lot more conservative, right? And they do discuss when thinking about this $400 billion, it's in accelerators, right? That's where most of this total addressable market is, the GPUs and whatever it costs to build out those GPUs, right? The memory around it, the bespoke accelerators around it, the kind of infrastructure around it. So obviously, a good portion is the GPU pie, and that overall bodes well for a lot of semiconductor companies that are dealing in the accelerating space. So they continue to double down that, hey, yes, look, this is a $400 billion total addressable market. All right, so now that we understand a little bit more about this total addressable market and continue to hear that double down that, yes, this is a $400 billion space, there was another question kind of asking, hey, what is the demand coming from this year? Is it more internal requirements? Is it more external requirements? And where do we see MI300 being a part of this? And I do believe this is a very important question because it gives us a little bit of a glimpse of where this AI demand is currently seeing a bit of the bottleneck, right? So first, let's take a closer look at the MI300X. Mark Papermaster mentioned that, hey, look, MI300X is growing pretty strongly. Lisa Su in their last earnings brought up the number to greater than $3.5 billion. It doesn't say that $3.5 billion is the cap, but they say at least $3.5 billion in 2024 versus the $2 billion they gave us the previous quarter. And they are tracking to that growth rate. So obviously that does bode well for AMD investors. Now, they do mention that right now, the big starvation in computing is actually coming from first-party applications by hyperscalers. But he does say that very quickly we are going to see a shift to third-party applications, and then we're going to start to see enterprises and enterprise market really picking up in the AI products. And some people might be wondering, Jose, what do you mean by first-party, third-party, and enterprise? So I do believe the best way to think about it is, let's take a closer look at Microsoft. So Microsoft has first-party application usage for AI. If you go to Microsoft Bing, they have their AI search engine now. They also have numerous their Copilot for things like coding, their Copilot for Microsoft Office, for emailing. They also have their overall AI solutions that are going into their first-party software solutions. So that's where a lot of the demand is happening right now. Is these big hyperscalers, be it Google, be it Microsoft, they're buying this huge being Meta, buying this huge computational power to improve their own AI solutions. Now, when we think of third-party solutions, now this is the cloud server provider. So we know Microsoft, right? They have this cloud solution. So the infrastructure that they rent out to third parties for other companies that want to use this kind of solution to build their own application. So I think it's pretty interesting that right now most of the computation is for internal requirements and not external usage. After that, and that's what he does, Mark Papermaster expects will kind of shift in the upcoming months. So we'll see the demand for those external usage. And finally, we're going to see enterprise companies that, hey, look, they might not need to train their huge large language models, but they do have a lot of kind of AI of data sets that they want to transform to their own AI solution. All right, so now that we understand where the overall AI market is at, I want to take a closer look at what they had to say towards NVIDIA. But before we go there, guys, I want to say thank you so much. We hit 36,000 subs. Can we hit 37,000 by the end of this week? If so, that would be amazing. If not, thank you guys so much for the overall support we are seeing in this channel. So make sure to hit the thumbs up and the subscribe button. Finally, if you want to do another way to support this channel, make sure to check out my special offer at fool.com/Jose. So now this is pretty interesting for what they had to mention towards NVIDIA. And as you guys are familiar, NVIDIA is my #1 position. AMD is my #2 position. So it's pretty interesting how I have to some extent be bullish on both these companies, but also have to see the bearish case for both these companies. And right now, Mark has pretty much mentioned that unfortunately, in the AI space, there has been no checks and balances. And when there's no checks and balances, you tend to see very high margins. More than that could be sustained without a competitive environment. And that's exactly what we're seeing with the H100, right? The H100 price is insane, crazy lead times. So Mark pretty much has mentioned that, hey, look, AMD is bringing competition back with this AI space, and they're gonna bring that check and balance to this market. So right off the bat, they're saying that by them entering the market, they're gonna put competitive pricing pressure on NVIDIA, and NVIDIA might have to see a nice reduction in margins. But before it's all fear and gloom for NVIDIA investors, I do want to remind, right, NVIDIA is a multi-billion. They're doing over 16 billion in the most recent quarter, almost 16 billion, right, in the most recent quarter in data center revenue, while AMD is only expected to do 3.5 in a whole year. So right off the bat, we can say, yes, but if this is a supply constraint market, and you're only able to do 3.5 billion in a year, how much pricing power can you really put towards NVIDIA at the moment if they still control over 95% of the overall market? Based on your numbers, obviously, if the numbers are different, that kind of pricing power competitive could also change. The other thing that could be happening, the other thing to kind of remember is this is a supply constraint market, even without AMD. So with NVIDIA right now, because of this supply constraint market, they're also able to really have that pricing power. We have been talking about that supply chains are easing, and one of the kind of yellow flags for investors could be that, hey, look, now that supply chains are easing, maybe we might start to see a weakness in margins for Nvidia. And that's something obviously we're going to have to take a closer look at during this earnings and maybe the upcoming earnings later on in 3 months. But AMD has pretty much mentioned that, hey, look, the race has begun. AMD is ready to be competitive in this space, and they have a seat on the table and are able to bring that check and balances to the market. Outside of that, AMD also mentioned one more thing for NVIDIA investors to consider. So right now, when we think of AMD and their AI solutions, they just have the MI300X. When we look at NVIDIA, they have the H100, they have the L40, they have the L4, they have all these other solutions for big training to little training to inferencing to workstations. And NVIDIA and AMD actually mentions that first, they just wanted to get a seat in the table, and that's with the MI300X. But in the upcoming months, we should see their GPU roadmap, and we're going to see that, hey, look, it's not just for high training. We might start to see AI chips for other types of solutions that are going to be maybe smaller, maybe weaker, maybe cheaper, but are going to hit different markets. So that's another interesting take that AMD investors should be kind of excited about in the upcoming quarters. So that's pretty much all I have here for AMD and for NVIDIA. This is definitely something NVIDIA investors should kind of consider. But like I mentioned, both of these are my top two positions. And at the moment, based on what we're seeing, I'm not going to put too much pressure on this negativity, but it is something to keep an eye out.